Chapter 6, End in Mind Thinking. Caleb had watched the web portal video A5 the night before and felt energized with the ideas. He bounced a bit on the stairs as he headed down to breakfast. As he stepped into the kitchen, he was shocked to see both his older self and his dad. Blaze was cooking breakfast and his dad was drinking coffee while reading the online newspaper on his iPhone. His dad looked up as Caleb entered. "You know, I could get used to this," his dad observed. "Having two of you here in the house. Especially since the older one of you has become such a good cook." Looking at Blaze, Caleb couldn't help but feel a bit inadequate. His older self had spent years developing skills that Caleb hadn't even thought of trying yet. Seeing Blaze demonstrate them in front of his father somehow made his own perceived shortcomings much more glaring. "How did you get so good at so many things?" Caleb asked his older self. "Well, it has been 8 years, Caleb. When I became organized with my schoolwork, that freed up a lot of time for me to pursue other interests. I developed a passion for cooking a few years ago," Blaze replied, casually flipping the frying pan as he spoke. "And I spent a lot of time working on my jump shot so I could join the basketball team in high school." "Yes, you have amazing basketball skills, Blaze," Caleb said, recalling the thrashing on the basketball court the afternoon before. Suddenly, he realized that he had called his older self by their newly created name in front of his dad. Glancing at his dad, he saw him laughing. "Don't worry, Caleb, I was waiting for the naming to happen. I knew you would be calling him Blaze. He told me last week," his dad stated. "What? Last week?" Caleb snorted, looking over at his older self, but his words trailed off as it suddenly dawned on him. His older self, aka Blaze, didn't say a word. He just smiled. "You knew all along, didn't you?" Caleb breathed. "You're catching on, Caleb," Blaze laughed. "Like I said, this isn't the first time I've gone through all of this." Their dad put down his phone and looked at Caleb. "We'll refer to our Caleb 2.0 as Blaze from now on, and if anyone asks, we'll say he is your cousin. Oh, and by the way, Blaze will be staying with us for a while. We'll set him up on the fold-out couch in the living room." Caleb sat down, his mind struggling to come to terms with this new arrangement. Up until now, Blaze's visits had been short and to the point. He hadn't considered the idea that Blaze might move in with them. He could now see that things were going to be disrupted for longer than he had previously thought. "Don't think of this as a disruption, Caleb," Blaze said, seeming to see the gears slowly turning over in Caleb's head. "Think of this as a complete reset. A placement on a set of tracks, or a road, or trail. One that leads to a guaranteed successful future. When you are certain that doing something now will lead to the exact result you want, you'd do it, wouldn't you?" Stunned, Caleb looked at Blaze. He thought at first that he had spoken his thoughts out loud. Then, with a start, he realized that he didn't need to. Blaze already knew how he was going to react. He had been through this before. Blaze had experienced everything Caleb was about to and knew how to overcome all the challenges ahead of him. Other people could guess what impact their actions would have on the future, but Caleb would know, if he could learn and apply the clever quick methods. Blaze was proof, right in front of him. The results spoke for themselves. With that thought, he made a pledge to himself not to let this opportunity pass him by. You'd be amazed at how many people don't make the connection, even when the evidence is clear about where certain actions will take them. It's all about picturing the person you want to be and then making a plan to get there. You might think of it as beginning with the end in mind. "I get it," Caleb said. "I know you do," laughed Blaze. "But many people don't. Think of a person trying to make a New Year's resolution," Blaze continued, "but not having a practical plan, with enough small steps that they know they can manage, to get them there. It's like someone saying they want to become an amazing athlete, but they don't have a plan to become fit and to practice the skills that they will need. Without the necessary in-between steps, it's not going to happen. It's all about setting specific goals that make sense for the person and that are achievable and realistic. They also need to know how long the plan goes for and how they know if they've gotten there or not. Makes sense, Caleb nodded. So much of life is like that. If you actually want to accomplish something big, you have to make plans. It's the same with big assignments or projects at school, Blaze continued. You have to be able to break them down into manageable chunks that you know you can do. Then, if you've planned well, and you get all the parts done, it's like boom, big project done. Almost like magic. I do have a big project I have to get done by the end of this month. That's about 4 weeks away though. I thought I would start it a few days before it was due, but now, you're thinking that won't work the best for you. You're thinking how it might be better to make some plans and get started right away, Blaze interjected. Smiling as Caleb nodded, Blaze continued. That passion project for this month isn't going to do itself, Blaze stated. Caleb's teacher, Mr. Badial, was keen on having his students explore areas that they were independently interested in. For that reason, there was a huge range of possible topics. Step 1 was coming up with a topic and then getting the go-ahead from Mr. Badial. Understood. I should get started today, Caleb agreed. So, how about we meet at 3:30 at the main library on Granville Avenue? Blaze continued. You mean to start working on the project? Sure, that should be okay, Caleb replied, thrilled that it seemed that Blaze was going to help him get started on his project. As Caleb ate breakfast and got ready for school, he reflected on how busy his life was becoming. He was excited though, because he realized how all the plans he was making now were going to lead him to the future he wanted. He thought ahead to his first math tutoring session at lunch. Now that he knew that science and time travel were in his future, his goal of improving his math abilities took on a whole new level of importance. Also, seeing the success that Blaze had achieved gave him a very clear picture of the positive results that come about by setting goals for personal improvement. It was going to take some work, but he knew that the results would be worth it. Before long he was sitting in his first class of the morning. As he had become more connected with his classwork, he found he was paying more attention. As he paid more attention, he found he was understanding things more. As he understood more, his enjoyment of his classes grew. He was also feeling much better about math. The tutoring was going to really cut down the time needed for him to complete his homework. Almost before he knew it, the school day had come to an end. Then he was off to the library to meet Blaze. This is going to be good, he thought, as he headed down Granville to get to the library. He had never before felt as excited to do a school project. He hadn't exactly figured out what he was going to do his passion project on, but he knew it was going to be something about space, rockets, and travel, with some element of time wrapped up in it all. He smiled to himself at the thought. As he pushed through the turnstile, he noticed Blaze at a table in the corner, hunched over with stacks of books on each side of him. He appeared to be lost in thought as he studied the charts spread out in front of him. Caleb came to a stop just behind him, not wanting to startle him. He was close enough now that he could hear Blaze muttering. You've got to be kidding me, this isn't right. No mention of Xylon? This alignment is all wrong. What's the year on this chart? Oh right, they don't figure out that directional anomaly for at least another year. At that point, Blaze glanced around briefly and noticed Caleb standing there. Oh, glad you're here, Caleb. I remember working on your project, so I went ahead and pulled some resources for you. Looking these over, I suppose I shouldn't be surprised that there is no mention of the more recent developments in the understanding of space. New areas of knowledge are opening up all the time, and I suppose the scientists have to make sure they can understand it first before they try to explain it to others. There's always a delay, also, before information makes its way into books in the local library. Journals and magazine publications, in print or online, can often make for better, more up-to-date sources. It's important, as much as possible, to have the most accurate information from reliable sources that you can trust for sure. You'll learn more about choosing materials later in the Clever Quick series, but for now you can trust me to help figure out what resources are best for you. Not to be conceited or anything, but I'll be a pretty good resource for you on this project." "I knew you were going to be," Caleb exclaimed. "And somehow, I knew you would have a bunch of resources set up for me here. Guess we should get started." "Right you are," Blaze responded. Over the next hour, Blaze helped Caleb review the information in the selected books and charts. An idea was beginning to form in his mind and his excitement was growing. He turned, ready to outline his thoughts to Blaze. Blaze just held up his hand and nodded. "Oh, right," Caleb sighed. "I would normally say that sounds like a great idea. But, since you haven't spoken, I'll just say that the topic you have forming in your mind is going to work spectacularly well. But, there isn't always going to be two of us to work through everything. So, how about you run that topic by your teacher, Mr. Badial, in the morning, and then we'll meet back here again after school tomorrow to set up your goals and your overall plan. In the meantime, this evening, why don't you check out video A6, End in Mind Thinking, Part 1? Caleb laughed. "Sounds great." As they headed home, Caleb began wondering about information, libraries, and learning in the future. "In some ways they're the same, but in many ways they're different," Blaze began, without waiting for Caleb to formulate the question. Blaze went on to talk about how learning in his time, 8 years in the future, was quite similar. Then, Blaze said something that really shocked him. "Things do change quite a bit by the time we get 16 years into the future," Blaze continued. "What? How would you know?" Caleb questioned, suddenly fully alert. "You think that you're the only one to be visited by their future selves? Have I got stories to tell you?" Blaze continued, his eyes getting a faraway look to them.